They join us on Fridays, two distinguished journalists. He's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's Michael Shure, everyone. And this other guy is the former senior correspondent at ABC News, longtime White House correspondent as well. How about it for Jim Avila? Gentlemen, thank you for being here as always. We're expecting a SCOTUS decision, as you're aware, an activist court, and they now have this case that has been taken on involving the abortion pill. And maybe you can give me a thought about this, but it's interesting to see, I think from a big picture standpoint, the major government institutions charged with deciding on which medications are safe. The FDA is the, has the experts, has the doctors, has the researchers. It's the FDA that pharmaceutical companies petition to get these various drugs okayed as both effective and safe. But the FDA is being completely circumvented now by the courts increasingly. So I say increasingly, I mean, this may just be the beginning. Michael, what's your take on where we are and what might happen?
Look, I mean, to say what might happen, I mean, you've seen the Supreme Court put stays in on this ruling on the banning of this medication. I had this pill. I think that this is sort of in a big picture way, a very tense time for the Supreme Court. John Roberts being asked to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee about the Clarence Thomas issue. The court, and as you said, the legislature's deciding by going around the FDA at a time where the FDA and the CDC are not at their highest level of popularity due to the sort of a lot of the scurrilous things that were said about them during the pandemic and continue to be said about them, and the problems they've admitted having, by the way. Not all of it was scurrilous. So I think that you're gonna see a court make a decision, but you've heard voices like Samuel Alito, the people that have been saying that we should stay this thing, who are typically very, very pro-life and not in favor of abortion rights. They're people that voted for the Dobbs decision. So I'm not good at predictive analysis of the court, but what can be predicted is this is kind of I think a turning point for the court in terms of activism.
Sure. I mean, I think that seems indisputable. Huh, Jim?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I covered the Supreme Court in D.C. and got chills sitting in that room. It was such a,
Hang on a second. Hold on a second. Albert, what is that frog sound that is in the background of Jim Avila? Do you hear it? Albert, wake up.
I think it's like Pinocchio's nose. Jim never covered the Supreme Court, so it makes this sound.
All right, well, Jim, keep going. But if we don't, if we can't get rid of it, then we got to have you break off and come back on. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Well, so what I was just saying is that it used to be, and this is just, when was this that I covered in 10 years ago? Immigration. There was a lot of immigration stuff going on in the court, and I was able to cover it. And you get
stop. Damn it, Albert. I know.
Okay,
is it that we had this happen before, didn't we? They do this to me all the time, don't they?
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Yeah, just take those off and try it without those. Yeah, okay. It's the Bluetooth, I'm being told. John Daly says it's the Bluetooth. All right.
Now you stuck with me, or we got...
We should have Avila in a moment. I did want to talk to somebody who actually covered the court, Michael.
I understand. Well, as you said, as I said, I don't know if you were paying attention. That noise goes off whenever Jim's lying.
I heard it. Yes.
Well, you see,
the man did cover the court. Damn it.
It's mating season.
Yeah, it is mating. Those were like mating calls.
Right now, it's mating season, and they're hungry.
All right, let's bring him back on. Try it again, please, Jim. When you were covering the court, you were saying you covered them for 10 years?
Well, I was just trying to illustrate that it used to be something that we all really respected. And, sitting in the chambers and seeing this was just amazing to me. What it has become now, so political and jammed with these people who have an agenda. it really has lessened what the court stands for, and I think, and it really has riddled away the confidence that America has. And now they're in another bind because so they pass this, they vote this Dobbs decision, which they say means we'll never have to talk about abortion again at the federal level because we're going to give it to the states. And now they're in the position of we can outlaw this pill federally, which is against our principles supposedly, or we can leave it to the states, and which is what they said they were going to do. So they're in a terrible bind.
Yeah, this is such a good point that you're making. And by the way, I don't know, Albert, what you can suggest on this.
Probably just reconnect, Jim.
Okay, you should disconnect and reconnect. But let me just restate what Jim's saying. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Sorry, Jim. You're hearing this. It's just distracting. This is really an important point that Jim just made, and Michael, maybe you can follow up on it. There is an articulated sense of, and it's a little like what they do when they pick stuff out of the Constitution that they feel. I mean, it happens around the Second Amendment, or the First Amendment for that matter. That we want to put it back on the states. The Fed shouldn't be involved in that. Central government shouldn't determine what's legal and what's allowable in these various states. Now you see just the opposite, as Avila was just saying. You see them getting involved, and you actually see judges in, these hand-picked judges. This guy is a jihadist down in Amarillo he really existed just to stop abortion. And I mean, look at his activism. Look at the way he even erased part of his record. So, he took his name off a paper that spoke to this very, very issue. I guess what I'm getting at is you see just what Jim's talking about, which is the central government, in this case, the Supreme Court, likely, or with the help of these other handpicked judges, you see them affecting states that are supposed to have their own rights. Go ahead, Jim. Michael.
Yeah, and look, it also goes back to the sort of the celebritifying of and I made that word up, and I wouldn't even bother dinging it because it's not really a word, but in terms of,
I will ding scurrilous, which you used earlier, and I didn't ding it. Go ahead. Yeah,
that's too late. The whole idea that we have made these judges so well known and their opinions and their leanings so well known and talked about and publicized is probably a disservice to the judicial process as well. I mean, there's this idea that, and it's the motto now of the Washington Post, democracy dies in the dark. So shedding a light on who these people are is super important. The televised confirmation hearings, I don't know how important those are. And I don't know how important it is to kind of elevate these people to gods in the way that they are. But if we don't, then we find ourselves in a problem area of having to deal with judges who are making rulings in the dark that we do not know about. And that becomes a problem in and of itself.
Well, that's also a terrific point. The way they've become celebrities has both been revealing as to who they are, but it's also been damaging in a big way. Jim, try it again.
Hello. So I guess the only other comment I would have is that John Roberts needs to do something, because the character and the credibility of the court, which used to be, that was the final thing. You expect all this stuff from the politicians, and you expect all this stuff in Congress and from the president. But when it got to the Supreme Court, even during the Nixon days, the Supreme Court stood up and meant something. And now, because of Clarence Thomas and his corruption, and because of this agenda that they have, the court has lost such standing that he has to do something. I'm really surprised that he hasn't yet.
This is a real moment, a potential moment for John Roberts to leave a legacy that is just more than that of a former Supreme Court justice, as someone who stood up for the court rather than the decisions, rather than the opinions, rather than the leanings, who stood up for the actual court. And he has an opportunity now, as Jim says, and I think it's important that he does that.
Yeah, you sort of feel like the horse is a bit out of the barn, but I don't know. I mean, they seem agenda driven. I was mentioning the court decision, though, that surprised. This isn't actually a decision, but in argument, they were talking about this religious case that involved the postal worker who, because of his religious views, didn't want to work on Sunday. And, again, when he first took the job, that you didn't have to work on Sunday, but then the Postal Service made this deal with Amazon. Now you do. They move shifts around. We've talked about it on the show several times. But both Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett sort of suggested in argument that this is like a festival of this is like having a conversation at a carnival. There's so many background sounds. It's like there are I've got dings. But
I'm sorry, that's me to blame. No, that's not
really.
So, Mark, I'm looking at some of the comments that are coming in questions that are coming on the screen, and they're all good. I mean, one was interesting. We should replace the court with an AI court, and there'd be no background and no prejudice, no bias, just the law. I don't think we're at that point yet, and I do think that there has to be a human part of being a justice as well. The other point that was made is, that it's become, as someone disparaged the court itself. Does anybody take it seriously? We have to. And if we don't now, then we have to correct it. And Roberts has to do things that makes us take that seriously, because those are the rulings that's the sort of the last great place we can go for these sorts of rulings. And even as flawed as it is, as imperfect as it is, it still has worked in many ways, and it's stopping working now, and it really needs to be corrected. So I still think, we don't give up on the court here, but the court needs a fix.
And the other problem, can you hear me now or no?
We hear you. There's just a croaking sound. It's a weird background sound. Yeah. I don't know what that is. Albert, what is that, Albert? Please.
I have no idea. Can you try getting closer to your Wi-Fi router or something?
The Wi-Fi in this building is great.
Okay.
Let me change to the iPhone, and then we'll try to.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Jim. I mean, okay. Your takes are so great, but they've got this croaking sound. It's just distracting.
Yeah, his amphibian collection really becoming problematic.
I was going to mention that I was surprised that Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh both had ruled in that Postal Service thing. On the part, they didn't rule, but in argument, they seemed to suggest that the business might have an undue burden to accommodate various religious observances. So right. You associate these people with a certain religiosity, and yet when their real fealty is to business, always, I think.
Right. But even that, Mark, you're naming justices. You're saying it's surprising because their religious backgrounds, and we may know too much about these people. I mean, the truth is their fealty could be to business. Most people who got to the high court, their fealty is to the law and the Constitution, as hokey as that sounds. And what we know about them, we're skeptical of because of the things that we know they've supported in the past. Now, I'm not defending it. I disagree with those people on balance most of the time. But the point is, it shouldn't really matter. I mean, these people are 9 people who are hearing a case, and their judicial, the jurisprudence of the past comes into play. But again, like, we're surprised when such and such happens. We keep such close tabs on it. But in fact, what's broken in the court is that money has now infected the court, because money goes to the Senate races that go to elect senators who are going to put into play these types of justices who are going to be adherent to what these senators believe their constituents and their conservative and liberal constituents want. So it just becomes it has become so politicized in a way that it never was. And we can talk about, the country's never been this divided. That's not true. The country has had we had a civil war, for God's sake. So the country has been divided at different times. It always feels more divided in the time you're living in. But the court has never been this politicized, and that's fact.
Hello.
Welcome back. Yeah, welcome back, Avila. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
So I just had one more point to make on the Supreme Court, and that is the dilemma that the Democrats are in. Dick Durbin, who was the head of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, is in a bind and probably not acting as, in my opinion, with the spine that he should. But the problem is, he can't subpoena John Roberts and make him come because he doesn't have the votes, because Dianne Feinstein is not in in the Senate. She's sitting at home in San Francisco or wherever she is, or DC, recovering from shingles. And her resistance to resigning and instead just going off the committee, wanting to go off the committee, and the Republicans blocked that, has put us in a bind where we can't hold the Supreme Court accountable. We can't call them before the Senate for hearings. So that's really a problem.
What are the realities if Feinstein were there, Michael? Could you have hearings where you could call some of these justices in?
Yeah, unquestionably, you have more power because you have that uneven balance in the Judiciary Committee. So that's what Jim's talking about. Is that it's a very selfish position she's taking. I don't, there's precedent for selfish senators and people not wanting to give up their positions of power. But at this point, Dianne Feinstein has done quite enough, and it's time. It's time, in many people's opinions, for her to leave the Senate so that the governor can name someone to replace her, and right away then they can replace her on the Judiciary Committee, because that person would not be bound to be on that committee who was named. But right now they can't do that, and that's the problem.
Well, I think that point was first made on this show by you, Michael Shure, that you'd need GOP buy-in, in effect, to just replace Dianne Feinstein. And of course, it was predictable that there wouldn't be that GOP buy-in. That's why there's a real backlog. She's missed 50 votes, though. I mean, at some point, you got to go, hey, right. This is, as you say, it's selfish. But I don't even know that it's Dianne Feinstein. I mean, someone told me, who's pretty close to them, that she may not even be aware of what's going on. Like, she may be diminished to that point. I don't know. So then you ask yourself, well, then where is the interest? Help me with the political strings that are behind Dianne Feinstein that want her to maintain that seat, even though it's a weekend at Bernie's thing with her now.
I have no idea who's propping her up and why, and how it's a benefit to the Democrats. I have no idea on that. Look, I've known Dianne Feinstein since she was the mayor of San Francisco, and I covered her at City Hall. She's a genuine, good politician. Somebody who I've supported over the years. This is a sad ending, and it really is ruining her legacy. And somebody needs to wake up and ask her, even if she can't understand it, get her to leave. It's terrible. I mean, sure, there are other. I mean, the defense has been that there are other old people in Senate who probably are senile and should leave too. And because they're male, we're not calling for that. I don't think that holds water. I mean,
and we have called for that before with male senators in the past. I mean, people called for that with Strom Thurmond. To a degree, they called for it with Johnny Isakson of Georgia. It has happened before where people have said that.
And currently in Iowa, I mean, Grassley is over the top crazy, but
he seems a little more with it. And again, we are actually just we're conjecturing about Feinstein. There is no, these are whispers of what's going on. There is no proof that she is not capable of making a decision. But
there's proof she's not capable of making a good decision, because she should resign the stinking.
That's true. But her staff would probably, I would guess, and this is a guess, cower to the pressure of the majority leader at some point, and to the judiciary staff, which is different than the Senate staff. So I don't know that this is just staff based, but again, I can't speak to it because we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But I will say this: it can't go on much longer, because there will be impatience on the part of her Democratic colleagues, as unseemly as it might be right now for them to come out and say it. There will be a breaking point.
Yeah, part of the issue too is that she's been such an historic person in the Senate, and she has friends, Nancy Pelosi is her friend. Nancy Pelosi going to go and ask her to resign? It's like me asking you, Mark, to stop the show. I'm not going to do that, even if I disagree with you. You're my friend. And I think that's part of the problem, is that she's friends with Schumer. She's friends with these people who are not asking her to leave, and it's really hurting the country. The Democrats are hurting the country doing that.
But you don't know that she's best friends with John Tester and Chris Murphy. You don't know that she's best friends with a senator from another state, that Mark Warner, whatever, that she may not be that close with. But there's also, at a certain point, the risk for reward. She is friends with them. But if Chris Murphy came out as her best friend and said, look, I think it's time for the senator to resign, that doesn't end the friendship. And if she is in such poor shape anyway, and I don't mean to be insensitive, the friendship is not going to be offering Chris Murphy much anyway.
Yeah.
I want to pivot to the announcement by RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that he's entering the race for president. I mean, there have been others, the Nikki Haley's of the world on the Republican side, and Larry Elder just added his name, I think, in the last day. Kennedy is polling, at least early on here, and again, I'm sure Michael would say, don't pay any attention to any poll this early, but I mean, it's kind of all we have to judge on in terms of enthusiasm. He's polling in double digits, he's polling in the teens.
The name RFK, sadly, is just going to get votes by accident anyway.
I see.
People are going to respond to that in the poll. I think people who are anti-Biden, who are Democrats, might poll that way. People who are independents because they felt a certain way about the pandemic and vaccines, he's going to get them. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will not be president.
But might he, Jim, influence the conversation? He has a very populist message.
Well, if he gets enough support that he's in the debates, that could be a problem because, let's face it, he does have that name, and his only issue is anti-vax. So he's going to get on the debate stage and he's going to do that.
He has an environmental issue.
He does, yeah. He's been an environmental attorney. I take issue with that, but I hear you. I think that's the thing that's going to jump out at people. Yeah, but he actually has a real worldview and policy.
President Biden doesn't have to debate him either. I mean, it's not like there's this open field. He can say, I'm not going to debate RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, and we're going to move on from this. And I think he'll have his moment, and it's probably starting now. I will point out that his wife endorsed my congressional campaign.
I love his wife. Yeah. What the heck happened?
She's married to a man she presumably loves, and if he's running for president, she's going to support him. But maybe she'll be 0 for 2 in endorsements because she did endorse me, and when I ran for Congress.
So you're saying she doesn't have a very distinguished track record when it comes to endorsements, in terms of
choices are 1 for 2, but her success rate is 0 for 1. So.
Her compass is clearly correct as to those people she supports, Michael. I was a big supporter of your campaign, but sadly, we couldn't bring it across the finish line. All right, and on the Republican side, it's just a rugby scrum, right? Everybody under Trump. By the way, I should mention Marianne Williamson's also in this game on the Democratic side, but on the Republican. Yeah, on the Republican side, it's an open field with everybody from DeSantis to Nikki Haley, not particularly at this point anyway, energizing any of that electorate.
No, and keep your eye on Tim Scott. He's the senator from South Carolina. He has a lot of money. He has a lot of money that he's raised from conservatives, that he's raised for his Senate campaigns. He goes into this even though we know Nikki Haley's name a little more nationally, he goes into this with a war chest that she doesn't have. And the argument could be made that she may never be able to get because they're both raising money from South Carolina and her fundraising is not done as well. So money speaks in those primaries. And I think that he will be someone that we'll hear from. I don't expect he'll be president, at least in 2025 either. But
there's nothing happening in all of this that changes the basic arithmetic and the basic framing of the general election in 2024.
No, not until people say they're not running. I think that I'm going to be wrong, at least initially, about the president not running for re-election. They say they've moved that up to as early as even a week from now, that he would be announcing for president. And I've maintained for a long time I didn't think he was going to run. I still don't think DeSantis is going to run. But until people start dropping out, you don't really get the shape. Big names drop out, you don't get the shape of a free-for-all type of environment. Yes, there's a free-for-all on the Republican side, but it doesn't matter as long as the former president holds that percentage.
The last minute here, I was going to just mention this to you guys because I think it's a sign of what's to come. A legal strategist, top Republican legal strategist, at a private pitch to the RNC, told a room full of GOP donors that conservatives have to band together to limit voting on college campuses, same-day voter registration, and automatic mailing of ballots to registered voters.
Yes.
Cleta Mitchell is her name. She's a longtime GOP lawyer and fundraiser, worked closely with former President Donald Trump to try to overturn the results of the last election. She gave this presentation to the RNC donor retreat group in Nashville. They want to, in other words, restrict voting and even eliminate voting and voter registration in many ways. The GOP does, seeing that the more people vote, the lesser chance the Republicans have to prevail in many races.
Right, and the young people, young people have been voting Democratic, and they just haven't been voting enough. And in 2022, they did come out, and that was one of the factors in limiting the red wave that everybody predicted. So the Republicans see that. They've always been for making it more difficult to vote because, by trying to limit minority voting, by and making it more closing polling places all over the place. So it's not a surprise that they would consider this because they see the writing on the wall. The demographics are not in favor of the GOP. The GOP is a dying party. It has this 35% that are behind Trump, but on the issues of abortion, gun control, the major issues of our time, they are on the wrong side. So they need to try to limit who's voting. It's simple math.
Yeah, and voter suppression, like Jim said, has always been part of their game. It is voter intimidation, voter suppression, muddying the waters. Can I go to college in another state and register there or not? Can I, if they say I can't, then I won't. And then I won't vote because my absentee ballot, that just takes too long to do from my college campus. So they make it difficult, but they also make it complicated. And that's part of their goal as well.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for showing up here on Fridays. So appreciate your takes. And thanks for hanging in through a couple of blips and bloops, Jim Avila, and getting us to a
I don't know what
oddly, the iPhone is a more stable connection.
Jim now has a whole week to troubleshoot this, which is great.
All right, find them both here on Fridays, the great Jim Avila and Michael Shure. Thanks, boys. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.